Hannah's morning began like any other, with the soft hum of the radio playing in the kitchen and the aroma of fried plantains wafting through the air. At 14, she was the pride of her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Williams, who adored their only daughter with every fibre of their being. To them, Hannah wasn't just a child, she was a gift from God, a blessing they had prayed for after years of waiting. "Hannah," her mother's voice rang out, warm and commanding. "Come down now, or you'll miss breakfast." "Yes, Mama," Hannah called back, fastening her school tie. She grabbed her neatly packed school bag and hurried downstairs, her braids bouncing with each step. In the kitchen, her mother was plating her food, a generous serving of jollof rice and chicken packed neatly into her lunchbox. Beside it was a crisp 500 note, folded and placed on the table. "Good morning, Mama," Hannah said, planting a kiss on her mother's cheek. She took a seat, watching as her mother fussed over the contents of the lunchbox, ensuring everything was perfect. "Morning, my dear," her mother replied with a smile. "Here's your lunch and some money for snacks. Remember, no borrowing, no lending, and absolutely no collecting anything from anyone. Do you understand me?" "Yes, Mama, I understand," Hannah said with a sigh, though her tone carried no hint of rebellion. She was used to her mother's stern warnings, which came from a place of love and concern. Hannah's mother believed the world was full of hidden dangers, and protecting her daughter meant setting firm boundaries. "You're a good girl," her mother said, patting her head. "Now hurry, your father is waiting to take you to school." Hannah grabbed her lunchbox and the money, giving her mother a quick hug before dashing out the door. She didn't know it yet, but this ordinary morning marked the beginning of something that would change her life forever. The school grounds buzzed with life as students chattered and laughed, their uniforms crisp in the morning sun. Hannah arrived just as the school bell rang, signalling the start of classes. She quickly spotted Cristiana, her best friend, standing under their usual tree. Cristiana was a lively girl with a radiant smile and a knack for making people laugh. She and Hannah had been inseparable since their first year at school, sharing secrets, stories, and dreams of the future. "Hannah," Cristiana called out, waving her hand. "Hurry up, or Mrs. Peter will catch us." Hannah grinned and ran to join her friend. Together, they made their way to the classroom, their laughter echoing down the hallways. As the morning lessons dragged on, Hannah's mind wandered to break time, where she and Cristiana would sit under the tree, sharing stories and snacks. It was a cherished part of her day, a moment of peace amidst the chaos of school life. When the bell finally rang, Hannah and Cristiana grabbed their food and headed outside. Under the shade of the tree, they unpacked their meals, chatting animatedly about their weekend plans. "Here," Cristiana said, holding out a biscuit. "Try one. My mum bought them yesterday." Hannah hesitated, remembering her mother's warning. "No, thank you. I have my own food." Cristiana frowned. "You're always saying no. It's just a biscuit, Hannah." "I know," Hannah replied softly, "but my mum doesn't let me take things from anyone." Cristiana sighed, her disappointment evident. "Fine. More for me, then." Later that afternoon, as the day wound down, Cristiana approached Hannah with something small and colourful in her hand. It was a bright red sweet, its wrapper shiny under the light. "Hannah," Cristiana said, her voice low, "take this. It's just a sweet." Hannah shook her head, her heart sinking. "I can't. Thank you." "We're not," Cristiana snapped, frustration creeping into her tone. "Do you think I'd harm you? We're best friends." "No, it's not that," Hannah said, feeling the weight of her friend's hurt. "It's just, my mum warned me not to take anything from anyone." Cristiana's expression softened, but her eyes still held a flicker of disappointment. "Okay, But if you want us to stay friends, you have to take this one sweet. Just this once." Hannah hesitated, torn between her loyalty to her mother and her desire to make things right with her friend. Finally, she sighed and nodded. "All right, I'll take it." She slipped the sweet into her school bag without a second thought, relieved to see Cristiana smile again. The tension between them eased, and they spent the rest of the day laughing as usual. At home that evening, Hannah recounted her day to her mother, sharing every detail with enthusiasm, but when she mentioned the sweet, her mother's smile faded. "You took something from someone?" her mother asked, her voice sharp. "Yes, Mama," Hannah said, quickly adding, "but I didn't eat it. It's still in my school bag." "Go and bring it," her mother said, her tone laced with unease. Hannah hurried to her room and opened her bag. Her hand reached inside, searching for the sweet, but what she pulled out made her scream. It wasn't a sweet anymore. It was a small, severed finger, its pale skin smeared with blood. Her mother gasped, clutching her chest. "Blood of Jesus! What is this? How did it get into your bag?" "I don't know," Hannah cried, tears streaming down her face. "It wasn't like this when she gave it to me." Her mother immediately called their pastor, explaining the horrifying discovery. Within minutes, Pastor Paul arrived, his face grave as he examined the finger. "This is no ordinary matter," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We must get to the bottom of this." The pastor led a prayer, asking for protection and guidance. Then, turning to Hannah's parents, he said, "Tomorrow we must visit her school and confront this Cristiana." The next morning, as dawn broke, Hannah's parents were already preparing for the journey to her school. Pastor Paul arrived early at their home, bringing an air of seriousness with him. He was a man of faith, but there was a quiet fear in his eyes, a fear that something very dark and unsettling was unfolding. "Hannah," Pastor Paul said softly, turning to the girl who was still processing the nightmarish discovery. "Stay close to your parents today. We will uncover the truth, but we must be careful. There's power in what we're dealing with." Hannah nodded silently, feeling a lump form in her throat. She had never been afraid of Cristiana before. Cristiana had always been her closest friend. How could she possibly be involved in something so sinister? The journey to the school felt like an eternity. Hannah's mind raced with questions. Was Cristiana really responsible for what happened? If she was, what kind of power did she possess? Was it something as simple as peer pressure, or was there something more disturbing at play? When they finally arrived at the school gates, Pastor Paul led the way, and Hannah's parents followed closely behind. The school grounds, usually bustling with noise and energy, felt unusually quiet that morning, as if the very air was heavy with anticipation. Hannah's heart skipped a beat when she saw Cristiana standing near the entrance of the school, talking with a group of her friends. As soon as Cristiana saw Hannah's parents and Pastor Paul approaching, her face went pale, and she immediately turned, running toward the school building. "Cristiana!" Pastor Paul called out, his voice firm and commanding. The other students froze, sensing that something was amiss. Cristiana's quick departure only fueled their suspicions, and soon a hushed silence fell over the school. The whispers began. "Did you see that?" one student whispered. "She was talking to the pastor," another murmured. Hannah felt a wave of dread sweep over her. What was happening? Why had Cristiana run away? Without missing a beat, Pastor Paul began to pray softly under his breath, asking for guidance and protection. Hannah, her parents, and the pastor made their way to the school office, where the headmistress was waiting. She had been alerted to the situation, but was as confused as anyone else. Hannah's parents and Pastor Paul have come to speak with Cristiana, the headmistress explained. She hasn't returned to class, though. It seems she knows we're here, Pastor Paul said, his eyes narrowing as he spoke. We need to find her. The search for Cristiana took them through the school's corridors, classrooms, and even the back of the schoolyard, where students sometimes gathered to escape the watchful eyes of teachers. But there was no sign of her. It was as if Cristiana had vanished. Meanwhile, Hannah couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was happening just out of reach. She thought of the severed finger in her school bag and wondered if Cristiana had somehow been involved in something dark and dangerous. The idea of her best friend being part of something sinister gnawed at her. Finally, after what felt like hours, they found Cristiana huddled behind the school's maintenance shed. She was crying, her face streaked with tears, her hands trembling. Cristiana looked up when she saw Hannah and her parents approaching, her eyes wide with fear. She stepped back, instinctively, as if she were trying to put distance between herself and them. "I didn't mean for it to happen," Cristiana whispered, her voice shaky. "I didn't mean for any of this." Hannah, her heart heavy with confusion and pain, stepped forward. "What are you talking about, Cristiana? What happened to the sweet? Why was there a finger in my bag?" Cristiana shook her head, her eyes brimming with guilt. I didn't want to hurt you, Hannah, but it's too late now. I've already gone too far." "What do you mean?" Hannah's voice was trembling, her confusion turning into fear. "Cristiana, you're scaring me." "Oh, I was given the sweet," Cristiana whispered, her voice barely audible, but it wasn't just a sweet. It was a trap, a test of loyalty. Hannah's heart raced. "What kind of test? Who gave it to you?" Cristiana lowered her head, her voice trembling as she spoke. "There's a group. They're called the Circle. They've been watching me for months, ever since I started school here. They have powers that can control people, make them do things, bad things." "The Circle?" Hannah repeated, confused. Cristiana nodded. "They made me do things I never wanted to do. They told me to give you the sweet to see if you would accept it. They said if you didn't accept it, something terrible would happen, and if you did, they would have control over you." Hannah's mind raced as the weight of Cristiana's words sank in. "But I didn't eat it," she said quickly. "I only put it in my bag." Cristiana's eyes filled with tears. "I thought it would stop, but when you took it, it was already too late. It was already too late to change what had been set in motion." Pastor Paul stepped forward, his expression hardening. "What did you do to her, Cristiana? What are you involved in?" Cristiana sobbed, her whole body shaking with fear. "I didn't want any of this, I swear. I didn't mean to hurt Hannah, I only wanted to be accepted. They promised me power, promised me that if I followed their instructions, I would be special." As Cristiana broke down in front of them, Pastor Paul stepped in and placed his hands on her shoulders, offering her a kind yet firm embrace. "You have made a choice, Cristiana, but it's not too late to make things right." "What do you mean?" Hannah asked, her voice still trembling. "The Circle's power is not greater than God's," Pastor Paul said, his voice filled with authority. "We will break it. With prayer, with faith, we can break the chains they have placed on you." Hannah's parents, still reeling from the revelations, exchanged looks. They had always trusted Cristiana, but now everything had changed. "We need to take action," Pastor Paul said. "The Circle won't stop until they have what they want. But Cristiana can still be saved. You need to be strong, Hannah. This isn't just about you anymore. This is bigger than both of you." As Hannah stood beside Cristiana, her mind raced with thoughts of betrayal and fear. She had trusted her best friend, shared moments of laughter and secrets, and now, it seemed, Cristiana had been part of something far more dangerous than Hannah had ever imagined. Hannah's parents, still grappling with the shock, exchanged concerned glances. Pastor Paul was trying to keep the situation under control, but the tension in the air was palpable. The schoolyard, once full of the innocent chatter of children, now felt like a place full of dark secrets and hidden dangers. Cristiana wiped her tears and looked up at Pastor Paul, her face pale and filled with shame. "Pastor," she began, her voice trembling, "I don't know how to undo what's been done. The circle, they've controlled my every move for months now. I thought I could escape, but they won't let me go. Every time I tried to resist, they punished me. They promised me power, a life free from the struggles I've always known. But now it's too much." Pastor Paul sighed deeply. "Cristiana, the power of the circle is built on fear, manipulation, and deceit, but their power is not greater than the power of God. Do you believe that, Cristiana?" I don't know," she whispered, her voice broken. "I was so desperate. I thought that if I did everything they asked, I'd be free from the life I hated. But now I'm trapped, and I've brought Hannah into it." Hannah stepped forward, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling within her. "We'll figure this out, Cristiana. I don't understand everything, but I can't just leave you like this." Cristiana looked at Hannah, her eyes wide with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. "You don't understand, Hannah. They're watching me. They're always watching. If I betray them, if I tell you everything, they'll hurt you. They'll hurt your family. You'll be caught in their web too." "I don't care," Hannah exclaimed, her voice firm. "I won't let them control us. We will find a way to break free from whatever it is they're doing to you." Pastor Paul nodded. "Your strength is what will help you, Hannah. Cristiana, you have the courage within you to break free. It's time to stand up to the circle, to refuse their control. And it starts with your confession." Cristiana took a deep breath and nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes to stop this, but you have to promise me that you'll protect me. I'm so afraid. If I go against them, they'll come after me. They'll come after all of us." Hannah's mother, standing silently beside her husband, spoke up. "We will protect you, Cristiana. You are part of our family now. No one harms my daughter's friend." The sincerity in Mrs. Williams's voice seemed to give Cristiana the strength she needed. She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Thank you. Thank you for believing in me." Pastor Paul turned to Hannah and her parents. "It's time we put an end to this. The circle operates in secret, but with faith and unity, we can expose their plans and break their hold over Cristiana." That evening, Pastor Paul gathered Hannah's family, Cristiana, and a few trusted church members at the Williams household. The room was quiet except for the soft murmurs of prayer as Pastor Paul prepared to conduct a ritual that would sever Cristiana's ties to the circle. Hannah, sitting quietly by her mother's side, watched the process with wide eyes. She had never seen her pastor perform a ritual like this before, and a sense of unease settled over her as he set out candles, symbols, and sacred texts around the room. "Gather close," Pastor Paul instructed, his voice calm but powerful. "We must pray with all our might. The circle's influence is strong, but we will fight it with the strength of our faith. Cristiana, you are no longer bound by their chains. You belong to God." Cristiana, sitting in the center of the room, looked nervous but determined. She closed her eyes, gripping her hands together as if holding onto her last shred of hope. The pastor raised his hands, and the room grew heavy with the weight of his prayer. "By the power of the Almighty, we sever the ties of darkness. We call upon the light to expose the truth, to reveal the hidden ways of those who would control the innocent. Let their power be broken." As the prayer intensified, the air seemed to grow colder, and Hannah felt an almost tangible shift in the room. It was as if the walls themselves were vibrating with the energy of the ritual. Cristiana trembled, but she held her ground. Suddenly, the room went silent. Cristiana gasped. "They're here? The circle? They're coming? They're coming?" Just as she spoke, the lights in the room flickered and went out, plunging the house into darkness. Hannah's heart raced in her chest. She could hear the faint sound of whispering voices, like a distant hum, rising in volume. "Stay close," Pastor Paul commanded. His voice was strong, but there was a slight tremor in it now. "We must finish this before they interfere." But it was too late. The whispers grew louder, filling the room with a sense of dread. Then, out of the shadows, figures began to emerge, dark, indistinct shapes, like silhouettes moving with an unnatural speed. Hannah's heart thudded in her chest as she instinctively grabbed her mother's hand. "What are they? What do they want?" Pastor Paul's eyes were wide, with a mix of fear and determination. The circle has manifested in the physical world. They won't let go easily. Cristiana screamed, her voice high and panicked. "Please, no, don't let them take me again." But it was too late. One of the figures reached out, its form now taking a more defined shape. An old woman with eyes as black as coal, her skin pale and almost translucent. "The circle will not be denied," the old woman hissed, her voice like ice scraping against metal. "Cristiana belongs to us. You cannot save her." At that moment, Pastor Paul stepped forward, his arms raised in defiance. "In the name of Jesus, I command you to leave this place. Your time is over." With a powerful motion, the pastor slammed his palm against the floor, and the room exploded with light. The dark figures shrieked and retreated, their forms disintegrating into smoke as the light filled the room. The old woman let out one final scream before vanishing, her presence no longer felt. Hannah, her heart still racing, turned to Cristiana. The girl was pale, her eyes wide with fear, but there was a sense of relief in her expression. "It's over," Cristiana whispered. Pastor Paul lowered his hands, his body shaking from the effort. "It's not completely over yet, but you are free. The circle has no power here anymore." Cristiana collapsed to the floor, her body trembling. "I don't know how to thank you all. I thought I was going to lose everything." Hannah kneeled beside her, taking her hand. "We're in this together. You don't have to be alone anymore." Cristiana smiled through her tears. "Thank you, Hannah. Thank you for believing in me." The next day, the air in the Williams household felt lighter. The oppressive weight of the previous night's events had lifted, and for the first time in weeks, Cristiana seemed at peace. Hannah's parents, though still shaken by what had happened, were grateful for the protection and strength of their faith. They made sure to remind Hannah of the importance of always trusting in God's guidance, especially when faced with difficult choices. As for Cristiana, she knew that her life had been forever changed. The chains of the circle had been broken, but the road to healing would be long. However, with Hannah's friendship and the support of her family and Pastor Paul, she felt a renewed sense of hope. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to our channel.